Well, greetings, everyone. My name is Russ Frankel. I'm here with Leslie Blicker, and we're here to talk with you about our DevEd ABE partnership efforts that have been going on for a number of years, and we're here to update you regarding that work. And so we welcome you, and we're grateful for your participation. So what we want to do is give you a little history, a brief history of this work. And this work began about 3 years ago. And it originated in the Northwest region, the Northwest Transitions region within the state of Minnesota. And there was this goal to really just increase the number of partnerships that were existing in the region. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go through that overview, and then we're going to talk about resources that are now available, and then we're going to get into some participant engagement with you. Next slide, please.
Russ, I was thinking you should introduce yourself. Forgive me for interrupting.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm Russ Frankel, and I'm a regional transitions coordinator in the Northwest region of the state. I'm also doing the same work in the Mid-Central region. And I've also done this work in the East Metro region over the past roughly 10 years. And then Leslie, if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. I have been working with Russ on this work since a few months before the COVID hit hard. So that was early 2020. And I had been working at the Minnesota State System Office for about 18 years prior to retiring at the end of 2019. I've also been an adjunct faculty member for 22 years, all at Metro State. So Russ, I'll go to the next slide.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you, Leslie. And it's a pleasure to work with Leslie based on her especially based on her Minnesota State expertise. And I also happen to work within the Minnesota State system. And so we are able to bring some insights and perspective that I think have been useful to this project, as well as just this knowledge around ABE and how it operates and the strengths and what it brings to partnerships. So starting back, this project all began in the Northwest region. There were a number of partnerships that were happening on campuses, but there was this goal really to increase the instances of those and really increase, just the more effective practices. And so as we were doing this work with folks in the Northwest region, it became readily apparent that there are other success stories that are happening in the state. We wanted to capture those, and in time, we've been able to accomplish that. And we've just discovered this really statewide hunger for these partnerships and for getting to know each other in terms of who are the folks that are doing this work, so that we can sort of share best practices and learn from one another. There's also been, some national interest, and we won't go into the depth of that, but it's very exciting when folks at the national level, through ROC or NROC and some other COABE and some other places, poke you on the shoulder and say, hey, we're interested in learning more about what you're doing. And so we've done some presentations and webinars at the national level. Next slide, please. So year one, we just, documented national best practices. We documented the partnerships that were actually occurring in the Northwest region. We were interested in barriers to success. And of course, there are a number of them. But at the same time, we were interested in what are some of the strengths of the partnerships. And we just started having conversations with MDE, the system office, and just a variety of folks about how can we advance this work. Next slide. So one of the ways that we have advanced this work is we formed an Affinity Group. And you can see the number of people that have been involved in this over the course of a couple of years. So year two, we were able to get after that. And it's been going strong for 2 years, which is great. And, it's a chance for faculty, to have had faculty, ABE instructors, and then administrators from both sides, both systems, to be able to come together, learn about effective practices, and advance these efforts on local campuses. We've already talked about the fact that we've done some national work, but we've also done numerous state presentations. And today is just another example of being able to have some conversation with people, from practitioners who have an interest in this topic. And then we began exploring the types of resources that would be useful for all folks to access. And we also documented additional existing partnerships. To date, there's 20 plus partnerships throughout the state. Year three, which is just behind us, is a really big year. We developed a toolkit for forming and sustaining, and Leslie will show you a little bit more about where that is located on that web page that you see there. And it's just been put into chat for you. It was the second year of the Affinity Group, and we facilitated a number of national level presentations. That was pretty exciting for not only us, but for practitioners from Minnesota to be able to strut their stuff. And then we began exploring this notion of a study circle or a learning circle. And you'll hear more about that from Leslie. Really importantly, we wanted folks to know that we were able to shift the funding resource that was coming from the Northwest to two other sources, one being the state level adult basic education, directly funding more statewide efforts, and then the Minnesota state system itself through an innovation grant that we were able to land. So we have essentially $20,000 in additional funding now to accomplish a number of objectives for this coming year. And this is when I do a handoff, I believe, to Leslie, and she can tell you exactly what that is all about. And it's pretty darn exciting. So Leslie, come on down.
Okay. Well, I hope the price is right. Well, hi, everyone. I want to say that we know we're going through some very high level kind of system-wide, if you will, efforts that we're doing. And a lot of you may be here based on your own interest about, well, we're trying to get something started at our camp, with our partner campus or college, or we've tried, or COVID just, almost nixed all of the efforts that we started 2 years ago. How do we get going again? And even drilling down into questions like co-teaching. So we're going to stay fairly high level, at least for our presentation. I think I'll talk for another, 7 minutes or so, I'm estimating. And then we want to open it up. And actually, if you want to right now, you could put into the chat your interest in this session, or if you've got some kind of a partnership going with your higher ed campus nearby. We know that many of you are doing high school to college transitions, but our work, because sometimes people who attend this ask this question, and the answer to the question is, who are you working with? Who are the recipients of the partnership? And they're already enrolled in one of the Min State colleges. and through testing and placement efforts, they're enrolled in a DevEd course. So we're talking about ABE instructors partnering with the college instructors or having a presence on the campus in some way that facilitates what we're looking for, which would be expedited success outcomes, so students can get to their credit-bearing courses sooner, their pass rates are higher, and so forth. So I just wanted to give an idea about that's what we're going for. The partnership toolkit, which I'll get into a little later, really breaks all of the steps down, if we will. We've interviewed successful partnerships in the state. We had 20 people from throughout the state contributing to the content. And so there are a lot of good tools, and a little bit later, I'll show you how to access those resources. But I wanted to just sort of touch base on that as a basis for this work. So knowing that we laid the groundwork, we developed resources, there's now what we're calling sort of the next phase of the resources we want to develop. And it's all been, the guidance for what to develop has come from our Affinity Group, people that Russ talked about, from those 80 people mentioned on a previous slide. So this year, through our 2 grants or funding sources, MDE and then Minnesota State, and that was a grant, we want to develop short tutorials as well as both faculty and student testimonial videos on how the partnership is working for the students, providing them greater confidence and what are the success measures. The study circles is interesting, and the reason I'm bringing it up here, and we'd like to hear from you a little later, if you happen to be an ABE office or program that is wanting to get going, to launch some kind of a partnership with your partner college, and you're not exactly sure how to get started, but you've identified 1 or 2 people who could be interested, we have a method for supporting teams through a study circle, which would probably go on for at least a couple months, 2 or 3 months, and you'd work together on that, working through the toolkit. So if you have any interest, please note it in the chat. We're also going to be broadening the sort of how-tos, how have people been successful? What exactly does co-teaching look like? In some cases, some of the instructors and faculty are not purely co-teaching. We call that a deeper level of integration, but they're there as support and providing students with add-on services. So we want to drill down into those webinars. And one of the things we'll be doing this year, it's number 5 actually, we're going to be hosting the first ever, and it'll be all online, the DevEd ABE Partnership Symposium. And I'm pretty sure we've locked in February 16th, and we've thrown out 8:45 to 12:30 p.m. as the time frame. So it's a half day. So mark that on your calendars now if you think it would be interesting. And we'll have a variety of speakers and maybe even a couple breakout sessions. We'll be planning it right away, starting fall semester, when fall gets started. You can tell I'm from higher ed because I say semester. And we're continuing the Affinity Group. So that's a very ambitious work plan for this year, coming year. And again, if you have any questions, we'll try to monitor the chat. I think we're okay. We have been trying to figure out, for all the partnerships that are in place, how do we measure success on sort of a common basis? And Russ and I, we've been talking about a common data set. And don't worry about the table, you can't see it that well. It's a sample of we did put together what we think is a very robust sets of data that could be collected, and we're running into barriers. We don't work from in-state. Our funding is coming out of MDE, or at least the ABE side. We can't really dictate or state to MnState, here's the data we want you all to collect. So we're still bandying about how do we do this in a way, the end goal is, if you invest time and some amount of resources in a partnership with your ABE folks, look at I hate to use a business term, but the return on investment that you get, right? Students persist, they'll graduate sooner, hopefully. I mean, we have all kinds of reasons for this. We just have to figure out what the middle stage is for collecting the data. If anyone has any ideas, feel free to put it in the chat. So now we get to the resources section. And if you have any interest in joining the Affinity Group, and we're definitely opening it up this year and saying, if you're new, if you haven't heard about it, please let us know. We meet 4 times a year, last year 5, this year 4. We offer, there are 75-minute sessions, and we give you 2 times. You can attend one or the other for the same content. So it's usually on a Thursday afternoon or a Friday morning, and you would pick one. And interestingly enough, we get about 20 to 30 at each of them. So people divide somewhat evenly. If you want to join, you do need to email both of us. It's a permissions-based website. It's on a OneNote site. So tell Russ and he'll add you to the roster for the Affinity Group. And then by emailing me, I can give you permission into the site. So we have a variety of topics. This year, I think, and Russ and I will be meeting right after this, we have kind of a lofty set of evaluation goals for the Min-State grant that we received. And I think we're going to be focusing more this year, hopefully, on exactly how do you get it started and how do you get to the point of success. I mean, I think they'll be a little bit different than the past webinars, but they're always fascinating and interesting, so we invite you to come to that. Also watch for information as we develop webinars. We'll be pushing that out through a variety of lists, but the Affinity Group is always the first place to hear about that information. And then our pièce de résistance, I guess, the toolkit. As I said, we had people from all over the state working on it a year ago, summer. There are 5 chapters. I'm going to go ahead and I have to get out of screen mode to get to my share here. So, and Russ, I'll ask you to monitor the chat because I'm going to minimize that at the moment. If you scroll down, you can see that the chapters here. The first chapter, this is where the real meaty content comes if you're sort of struggling at getting past some of the barriers you might have encountered already. But we give the context and introduction to what the DevEd and ABE model could look like. Then we talk about how do you actually create the partnership, and it includes things like finding administration support on both sides, which classes lend themselves best to partnering, selecting faculty and instructors to partner together. That's one of the, we've identified that as one of the key success measures, which it really takes getting people who want to work together and who are open to the idea of collaborating at the table together, and that it's not instant chemistry necessarily. It could take a year or 2 before the instructors find their relationship and their cadence that they want to use. Chapter 3, we call these the levels of collaboration, from a very light touch, ABE coming in as support, all the way to deep integration. And we have 5 levels that we talk about. Deep integration means where the 2 instructors truly are co-teaching and providing contextualized, learning for the students. And we have found that when there's a deeper level of integration, it correlates to higher success measures. So, and then we have stories from the field. We have 4 different teams. Is it 4 or 3? I can't remember. Who were asked a series of questions to answer. How did you get started? What were your barriers? If you required funding, how did you find the funding? And many more elements in that chapter. And then we have one called Documenting the Partnership, and what kinds of data would be important to collect and how people are presently documenting it, if they are. And finally, we have additional resources. And if you're interested, you can also access a full PDF file. Give me 1 second here. I think it's down at the bottom. Marisa, I'll ask you to come on at the top. Sorry about all this movement. Right here. You can download a full PDF. And you know what? We just added documenting the partnership and the resources last week. So I realize it's on my task list. I have to update this PDF file as well. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of, let me go back to slide mode. That's the end of that. And I'll stop by asking the folks who are here. I meant to say, I recognize some of the names who are attending right now because they've been involved in the Affinity Group and or even writing pieces of the toolkit. So I recognize Erica and I think it's Terry. I've minimized my chat. So welcome. And if you have anything to add or if anyone else was part of this and you want to add anything, definitely speak up as soon as we open up the mics. Now, my last question is, these are the partnerships that we've been able to document. They're not all at that deep level of integration or necessarily fully robust. It might be that one instructor from ABE and one faculty tried one class, but we're continually asking at all of our presentations, are we missing anybody? There's 2 slides here. I'm going to go slowly. Take a look. They're alphabetical. They're alphabetical by the Min State College. So take a look. And if you have a partnership or you're getting into something, let us know in the chat. And we'll also ask you about it when we dialogue. And then here's the second slide. Okay, give me 1 second. So I'll let you look at that for a minute. And I'll toggle back, just have another look. The reason we're asking is we're attempting to see if the work that we're doing throughout the state does correlate with an increase in partnerships or an increase in the expansion of the partnership, like into alternative disciplines. We've heard that a lot of the partnerships say, you know what, we did it in English, we did it in math. Now we're looking to go into some of the technical programs, you know, nursing, health, even career technical education. So we want to see if this is making a difference. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing in a minute, but here is your moment. I'm going to turn it back over to Russ. So we have 20 minutes and we would like to hear from you on many of these topics, not necessarily in that order. But take note, reactions to what we've said, any interest in a partnership in your area. Have you done any work? We'd like to get an update from you. Study circles. We're really looking for small teams who might want to start a study circle. And we could be ready to launch it at sometime in fall if you wanted to try to launch a partnership by spring, for example. Any additional resources that we've not thought of, and any topical ideas for the Affinity Group this year. So I will stop sharing. I will copy these and put them into the chat, and Russ is going to facilitate you all.
All right, Leslie, that was amazing to really think about how far we've come from this kernel of an idea to all of this action, this really positive, constructive action that has happened over time. And everyone in this space is sort of at this juncture with us of, you know, maybe being new to this completely, or yeah, I've had a little connection, or I've had a big connection with this. So at this stage, yes, we're interested. This is your session, and so we're interested in your reactions and any question that's really burning, right? That you really want to engage about. So what we will do is you have two ways to accomplish that. One would be to unmute yourself and come on video and ask away, or put something in chat for us. So who's out there? Who out there wants to get us started?
Well, there's a question in the chat, Russ. Do you want to field it? If not, I can. Can you explain the differences between DevEd and ABE?
Okay, well, why don't you go ahead, Leslie, and I'll fill in the blanks if there's anything more to say.
Sure. Well, I'm more understand the DevEd side, but from my work, you know, adult and Leah, can you put in the chat where you work? I don't know if you're on the ABE side, but adult basic education, right? There are the hub center. Okay. Can you tell me? Oh.
So the hub center is in St. Paul.
Sure.
I'm not sure if you know that, Leslie.
I'm assuming, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you know what ABE is. And if not, I'm going to let Russ describe that because I might miss something. But DevEd, developmental education, is has been a requirement at all of the state public colleges that, let me back up a minute. There are no entrance exams for the public state universities and colleges, meaning, right, students don't have to take those exams to get in. But what the state colleges do instead is there are tests like AccuPlacer. Now they're going to something, you know, last couple of years, multiple measures, which I'm sure you know about. So they're having some means for assessing students who come in and seeing if they're ready, you know, college ready to move into their program of choice. If not, they're required to take one or more developmental education courses, like in math, like in English. There might be a science component for some to bring them up to college ready level. And then there are tests done throughout the semester to see how they're doing and whether or not they're getting through that course successfully. The issue has been in the last many years is that it is costing students way too much to spend sometimes up to a whole year in developmental education. And also sometimes they don't persist then, they drop out. And so the legislature, it was in one of the early slides, 4 or 5 years ago already, said to Minnesota, to Min State, and this is happening all over the country, you guys have to figure out a way to get these students into their program, you know, sooner, how to revise, how to redesign developmental education. And that's when we sort of came in. There had been a lot of efforts going on throughout the state individually, but now every college was assigned with this task to report, how are they improving DevEd? And then there's much talk both at the legislature and among, even in the Affinity Group, we've heard not everybody is a fan of developmental education as a means for preparing students. So there are many alternatives. We know ABE, right? You have your own programs for college readiness, bringing adults into the mix. Even Min State has a program right now, a summer academy or something, where they're trying to get students ready for college. So I hope that's a long answer, but I hope I did justice to it.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that when you're in DevEd, you can become eligible for a Pell Grant. And, you know, so people will oftentimes do that. But you do not get awarded credit, you know, college credit. So obviously what happens in some cases, in far too many cases, is that students are expending their dollars on developmental education. They're assuming debt, and they're not necessarily acquiring college credit toward their, you know, graduation. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to reduce that time. So the partnerships we're talking about brings adult basic education and DevEd into the same space focused on the students' acceleration and completion of that dev ed experience, on the college campus.
Thank you.
You bet, Leah. All right, so other reactions to the presentation, thoughts, maybe if you have some partnerships that are happening out there, that you've now initiated or you've been approached. Tell us about those, please. Don't be bashful. Brian, anything you'd like to share with the group? Because I know you've got some things underway up in your area. Or are you eating lunch? All right. We did have an expressed interest in study circles. Folks, we can circle back to this too. So if all of a sudden something dawns on you, let's just make sure you have this opportunity to share with us. We did have some expression of interest in a study circle, and I'm wondering if Kirsten Collins can kind of talk to us a little bit more about what she's thinking.
Mm-hmm. Sure, Russ, I'm happy to. So this is something that we've been considering or I've been thinking about for some time. Before I was in ABE, I was in the TRIO programs, and I'm a graduate of the TRIO programs. And so developmental ed and higher ed is something that I'm familiar with. And as you all have mentioned, we've seen students that maybe spend a lot of their Pell Grant in Dev Ed, but we've also seen students that maybe just need one or two classes. And so figuring out, and then the social impacts of being on campus have been really beneficial to those students. So figuring out how we can bridge that gap in ABE, so we don't have as big of a gap between, advanced ESL students or GED students, and then students that are actually able to pursue higher ed.
Mm-hmm. And so for the group to know, what's TRIO?
Oh, TRIO is a federally funded program. I know that Hub Center has some folks from TRIO, Adult Opportunity Centers. And so they help students that are usually first generation low income background. And there's some English language learner programs too, as they're going into higher ed.
All right. Thank you, Kirsten. And can you tell us, when you think about your interest or your exploration of this study circle, what would the application be as you see it?
I haven't thought too much about that. I know there's some opportunities in workforce. Yeah, I haven't thought too much about it. I'd like to hear what other folks are thinking.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Kirsten. Other thoughts out there and reactions to this work? Do you think you're all here, you came with, some type of thought process in mind, like, oh, either you're completely curious, I wonder what this is really all about, or I stumbled into here because I thought I was going to be in another workshop session, and you're here. But what brought you here? What are you looking for, and how might we support you?
And Russ, while people are thinking, I don't want to stop the thinking process. Carolyn posted about the expansion efforts in St. Cloud Technical and Community College. Yes. With Cambridge. Anyway, at some point it would be great to hear from Carolyn about how that's going, how that happened, but I don't want to stop the thought process either for others.
Well, I think it'd be great to hear from Caroline. Caroline, can you come on board, and we'll welcome you back to the ABE fold.
Yeah, I don't know how much you're going to hear from me in terms of details, because I'm in day 3 of just being back after kind of a 1-year hiatus from ABE. Russ, actually, I mean, you know more because you are the transitions specialist, and this has been written into our transitions plan. But yeah, so for a few years now, St. Cloud Community Technical College, they've been doing a math partnership. But now hopefully this fall, we will be planning and organizing for a spring relationship for reading, writing. And then at the Cambridge campus of Anoka Ramsey Community College, we finally have gotten them to give us our lowest level, or excuse me, their lowest level of math course. They've kind of given that over to ABE, and that was already going on at the Anoka campus.
Ramsey, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But just because of enrollment numbers and whatnot, it hadn't started yet in Cambridge. So good things are going on there. But I'm going to take this opportunity to ask, because I have a very data-driven mind and always looking for the actual numbers and statistics. Do we have any champions at Min State, in the admin or upper levels, who recognize the value of this partnership and who are speaking with you, working with you on getting some data? Or is that something that you're going to be looking at more specifically this year?
Looks like Leslie's ready to respond.
We have tried, I will say, quite a bit. We've reached the office that has DevEd responsibilities. They're very, well, for one thing, there are only 2 people working in that office, maybe 3. They have been hands off entirely with regard to implementing changes or providing funding for changes in the whole DevEd realm. They're very aware of what we're doing, and quite a few staff as well at the system office are aware. So I'd say we've had some impact, but not to the point where they're able to say, let's take this on, let's fund this as a project, let's do it. The funding we did get from In-State came from a different office, and it was a one-time innovation grant for this year only. It may or may not could be funded a second year, but many people apply and they give out, I think, 20 of these. So it's not like the leadership at the system office have said, great. I mean, it had to be evaluated, and somebody thought it was very, very valuable to at least provide $10,000 this year. So that's fabulous. We're continuing to do our work. We're going to continue to meet with deans. We're hoping at the symposium, my hope is that we are going to reach out to everybody possible at the system office and at the leadership level on the campuses. I mean, to the extent that we know there are 20 partnerships, we hope we can at least get some of those folks to come to the table. So there are partnerships where the academic leadership isn't even aware necessarily of it or the need to sustain it with any continued funding. So we're trying to make an impact as best as we can from our, what are we, Russ? We're quasi-public in a way. We really don't have any role authority
Positional power.
Yeah. Positional power, but we're doing the best we can. So I hope that answers it.
Well, and I would just comment, Caroline, really quickly that we do have intention. We have evidence or measurements that are occurring in various stages with a number of these partnerships. And so I think one of our first attempts in this beginning of this year is to just gather that, give us what you got so we can kind of see what it is that people are currently collecting so that we have a better sense of, what is happening in this moment in time. And then based on that, we'll just have to see what that reveals to us in terms of, are there some things within that are obvious that we could encourage people to collect more uniformly.
And there are quite a few questions that have come in, Russ.
Okay, so let's take a look.
Yeah.
Now let's get to that, because, all right. So why don't you go ahead, Leslie, and because we just have about 4 minutes remaining.
I think so I can do one or two of them quickly. Mary, who asked about, could we go into more detail of the study circles? Just so you know, and then you said you were looking for ideas on how you get started. I would really urge you to take a look at that partnership toolkit. That's exactly why we did it. We hope we did it in easy to read language, you know, that it makes sense. We chunked it out into sections. The study circle will basically ask that you who might be interested, that you would check with your administrator if you're not one, maybe find one or two folks from ABE, and then go to the college. If you want to start it, find who might be responsible or teaching a dev ed course, maybe talk to them. But we're also willing, if you're interested, we're also willing to make that contact and at least forge an initial conversation with 4 or 5 of you and see if there's interest. If there is, then the study circle means get a commitment from at least, you know, an administrator and an instructor on both sides. And then you would work through the toolkit together. And it may be difficult, but you've got to find, you know, your counterpart who would be extremely interested in this. Okay, so
I'm going to move quickly to Jason. Jason asked, do students who get their GED really have a sense of what a college course is? Do you focus on specific language and topic that they want to study as you transition them to higher ed? I would say 2 responses to that. One is it's really dependent upon the local ABE program in terms of the kind of transition information that they provide to their particular student. And so that responsibility sort of lies there, but we do have access to a resource, another toolkit that's been created that is listed in our resources that I think is much more in line with that level of need that you're expressing, Jason. So have we posted that, Leslie, at this stage? Or we're about to, right?
What, that second, sorry, I was responding to someone. The secondary toolkit, you're saying?
Yeah, the
it's not ready yet.
Yeah, but as soon as it is.
Yeah, it's not, hasn't been published yet.
Yeah, but as soon as it is, you'll find it in the resource section of our toolkit. All right, so we're kind of getting toward the end. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else, Leslie, you see there that you could respond to. There's a lot of, you know, comments about barriers and reluctance, and we get all that, right? And that's, you know, what we're trying to do is sort of get beyond that. Looks like Gloria has a question.
Well, I know time is getting short. My name is Gloria. I work for the Metro North in Minneapolis, and I'm going to show my face here. It's better this way.
Thank you, Gloria.
Okay, nice to meet you. I know time is very short. I've been listening carefully to all what you guys are sharing. I've been working in the EL program, lately in the ABE program. And, you know, I hear you, and I think we need to be more practical. I have so many students with you know, higher education background coming to this country, and how can we help them, you know, to do what maybe they used to do in their country, you know? And so that happened to me too, you know, 30 years ago when I came here. It's like, where do you go so I can get my degree, you know, convalidated or converted? And, you know, then you find your ways. And I think that's the way that I would like to get some support from you, because I see a lot of students who would like, maybe not so much do what they did, but I know they are professionals and they're working, you know, well, first they need to learn the language, obviously. And then And then, probably, eventually they could use, their background education, whatever they did back in their home, whatever they did back in their home country. So where do they go? I try to help too as much as I can with my experience, but that's that. When Russ said, how can we support you? That would be my part. I guess we have a lot of students with a lot of potential, and so but they're kind of like stuck. And like I said, I've been around too, and now my students, their parents, and I'm teaching the younger students. And then I said, so what happened to you? Well, they don't have sometimes the confidence to continue. They don't have the confidence to continue. So it's like, I'm scared. I don't want to do it. And I'm like, you can do it. But it's because we're second language learners, it's by nature. It happened to me too. I can sometimes I take the second role, and I hear all my coworkers. So I guess that's what I have to say. I heard everything you said, and if there is a way that you can support me with that, or I can be part of something, so kind of like create. I don't know. Like I said, my experience in the ABE, it's probably for the past 6 years I've been doing it. But I have the EL, background for the past 30 years, so I've seen, and now I'm going to like third generation, and I see, okay, where are all these minorities? So maybe we can see some teachers, maybe we can see some, other type of professionals. I don't know. I guess that's what.
Gloria, I think I'll jump in quickly. I love what you said, and I have no doubt it's an issue. Bear in mind, we are not an agency, Russ and I. We're consultants being hired. The money that's been given to us is narrow. That's all it is how can you enhance ABE working together with DevEd specifically to improve student outcomes. So that's our role, and we can't go beyond what the money is there for. But Russ,
I thought I share my piece, and maybe a little bit of frustration too, saying, what do you do? How can you help? Here you have the students, I used to be a kindergarten teacher, it would be awesome to have a Spanish, kindergarten teacher to improve, the Spanish, in our immersion school or whatnot. But I thought I'd share that. So
thank you, Gloria. And I would just, because we run out of time.
Yes.
What I would do, Gloria, is redirect you to the State Department of Education, the MDE unit, to voice your interest and your need for support, and see what resources they can point you toward. All right.
Support to help these people.
Yes, exactly. And to help them become part of our economy and, that kind of thing. So I want to just thank everyone. I know Leslie does as well, for attending today. And if you would like to join the Affinity Group, let us know.
Sure.
We're interested in having all of you participate who are working with DevEd students or have this partnership idea in mind. And you can join a bunch of other people, birds of a feather flock together.
Definitely.
So that we can all, strengthen our sort of approach to this work. So thank you so much for attending.
No,
and
thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Take care.